Alright, so I will be discussing sex trafficking and the Syrian refugee crisis. First, we're going to start off talking about the refugee crisis within the Syrian community, how conflict plays a role in that, and what policy could do to help maybe lessen that. So first, we need to understand the difference between sex trafficking and sex work. This is, all this research is done by Balgamwala in 2015. Sex trafficking involves force, fraud, and coercion, and sex work is consent-based. It's really hard to tell the difference though, so it's not just one clear cut, oh, this is sex trafficking, this is sex work. There's no definite answer. First, we're going to understand the history. So we have the first wave in 1960 and 1970. This occurred mostly in Southeast Asia and the Vietnam. Some statistics are from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Around 2,925 people were trafficked for sex in Cambodia. Due to war, state monopolies on goods and opium, and social norms in which women and girls were prized and preyed upon, were the main reasons for the black market on sex trafficking, as talked about by Lester in 2015. Fighting in Cambodia created a refugee problem under the rule of Pol Pot, and they abolished money, schools, and private property, which forced 2.5 million civilians into camps. They were then trafficked and raped and sold. And that was given to us by the Encyclopedia of New Zealand. We have the second wave in the 1970s and 1980s. This was in the Middle East and North Africa. This all took place because of the genocide in Rwanda, the ethnic cleanse in Yugoslavia, the wars in the Balkans, and all used for rape, sex trafficking, and violence. Rape was for political purposes and emphasizing that the majority of the rapes and trafficking were directed against the Tutsi women in an attempt to destroy their culture. This was by Schedulback, 2001. During this time, around 5,000 or more Algerian women fled to Italy as refugees, and 80% of them indicated being trafficked. This was by the IMO in 2016. They actually made a whole video on it, and there were women and children coming from Algeria to Italy, and they talked to these women, and over 80 of them had been trafficked, and even far more of that were asked to be trafficked or to be nannies or anything like that, so being tried to be coerced. We have the third wave, which was the 1980s and 1990s. This was the Central and South America. Nearly 30,000 civilians disappeared due to the military kidnapping females and children to be trafficked. This was in Argentina. They actually celebrate this day. It's kind of weird, but they have a whole celebration/parade about this in Argentina every year. We just learned about it in our Spanish class. This was discussed in Hill and Nicholas. The International Labor Organization discussed how 1.8 million victims are forced into labor, including sex trafficking, and 10,000 women from southern and central Mexico are trafficked for sexual exploitation to the northern border regions of Mexico. It's important to understand that also during this time there were civil wars taking place, and that's how a lot of the gangs kind of came to happen, like MS-13 and all of that. In the fourth wave, which was the 1990s to 2000s, we have the post-Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc. It's estimated that over 500,000 women from former USSR states are being sold into trafficking. This was by Heel and Nicholas in 2017. It's been estimated that that every 1 in 100 females have been trafficked to date, and the majority of victims are being exploited in Russia, Turkey, Italy, Cyprus, and the UAE. Moldovan victims have been identified in more than 40 countries. Then we have the fifth wave, which is now happening currently from starting in the 2000s with the Syrian refugees. Traffickers prey upon those who lack security and opportunity, coerce and deceive them to gain control, and then profit them. 4.8 million people have been rendered refugees. Most of the refugees go to the largest number of hosts that do sex trafficking, like Lebanon, Turkey, Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt. This was stated by Buchan in 2016. As you can see, there is a general concept aside from the fourth wave that kind of follows conflict. Civil wars, Vietnam War, so forth. So there was research done, and this person stated that there are 3 different types of conflict that happen during the war that lead to sex trafficking. We have essentialism, which is strictly towards women, and is to assert militaristic masculinity. Then we have structuralism, which is specifically targeting a certain type of woman, and that's to attack based on ethnic, religious, and political groups. And then we have social constructionalists, targeted men and women. This is to masculinize the identity of the perpetrator and feminize the identity of the victim. So also CARD says that rape reinforces patriarchal relations between men and women. The main goal of rape and trafficking in War and Peace is to display, communicate, and produce or maintain dominance. This is seen in the Vietnam War with the first wave and their comfort women that they trafficked to the enemy side. This is seen specifically in the second wave with the Tutsi and Hutu women that were religiously attacked. This is seen in the third wave with the uproar of the organized crime and constant battles. And this is seen slightly in the fourth wave, but not as prevalent. And then now with the Syrian refugees. More specifically with the Syrian conflict, this all began due to peaceful protests that were inspired by the Arab Spring. This sparked the government to use deadly force and create a national uproar. The government infiltrated the country, forcing opposition supporters to take up arms, not only for self-protection, but also to expel the security forces in their own area. This created a civil war. The impact that it has caused is well over 400,000 dead, 5 million fleeing, 85% living in poverty, and 1.5 million children are out of school. So this coincides with sex trafficking because this makes them perfect targets. And Malrick, he discussed how these sex traffickers prey upon children and women that have no opportunity for prosperity. They are poverty-stricken, and they also go for children who, I don't know how else to say it other than, will not really be missed. So there's a specific instance where traffickers will wait outside of orphanages until they turn 16, 18, and the orphanages actually kick out the children. And they'll just take them right into the trafficker's arms and send them across the country. So with that being said, what can be done about it is policy. I think we need to enforce stricter policy upon what are we doing with these children in Syria. We need to keep a better account of them, and also we need to create a policy to allow these women to have better employment. That way they're not looking for odds and end jobs that could possibly get them trafficked. We also need better policy in attacking the sex traffickers themselves, because in most of these countries, they don't even have laws against it. It's just like a slap on the wrist, or the officials themselves are trafficking women also. We need recognition because public support creates policy. You can't have a policy without understanding and support of it. That was my presentation. These are my references. So we have Schedule back, did the European Journal of International Relations. Wagagamwala, the Trafficking and Narratives. I cited myself because I didn't want to copyright myself, I guess. The Global Vice to Local Girls. CARD, Rape as Weapon of War. Lessered, Human Trafficking in Colonial Vietnam. Hale and Nicholas broadening the scope of human trafficking research, Limothy, the Washington Post, and Malrick, the Natashas.